Powerpuff Girls, one of the greatest animated shows of our generation, and one of the shows that truly defined Cartoon Network during the days of its prime. It was certainly one of my favorite cartoons growing up as a kid. It has satisfying action, brilliant comedy, and it was all centered around three cute little girls. I guess you could say this show was to the late 90s and early 2000s as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was in the late 80s and early 90s. Though people who don't know about the show often take it for granted. They mostly view it as nothing more than a show for little girls, which is understandable. I mean, if you knew nothing about this more than has shown and just heard the title The Powerpuff Girls, can you take it seriously? And you really can't get a name more girly than that. If you thought that was weird how My Little Pony Friendship is Magic started the whole Brony fandom, the Powerpuff Girls did the same thing long before that. I'm here to give you my own personal retrospective of this show and how it affected my life. So sit back and enjoy my personal retrospective of the Powerpuff Girls. As always, the best place to start is at the beginning. The Powerpuff Girls was a show created by Craig McCracken, the same person who would later go on to create other fan-favorite cartoons like Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, Wander Over Yonder, and Kid Cosmic. The idea for the show first came in the early 1990s when Craig McCracken made a short film in college known as Whoop-Ass Stew, and the girls were originally known as the Whoop-Ass Girls. Yes, I imagine the title aging well with parents today. This film was shown in various film festivals that never officially aired on TV in the public. However, this film would become the foundation ground for the series we all know and love today. I first heard about the Powerpuff Girls when they first debuted to the public in February 1995. This is when the pilot episode of the show, Meet Fuzzy Lumpkins, aired on TV, but more on that later. But first, let's talk about the main format of the show, starting with the main characters. First, let's talk about the three main girls themselves. First up, we've got Blossom, voiced by Kathy Cavadini. She's the unappointed leader of the Powerpuff Girls, and she is also super intelligent. She's responsible for coming up with most of the girls' plans. She always answers the hotline whenever there's a distress call, and it's her responsibility to make sure her sisters are in control. She's probably the least interesting of the three girls, debatable, because of how she has the most common sense. But that's kind of what we like about her. I don't know why, but I've always kind of liked her straight main characters. Not to mention, she has her moments in the series where she really stood out. For instance, when she developed ice breath in the episode Ice Sore. Next up, we have Buttercup, voiced by Elizabeth Daily. She's the tomboy of the group, usually hot-tempered and always ready to kick the living daylights out of bad guys at no cost. Oftentimes, she overdoes it due to her lack of patience. She and Blossom also often have their disagreements with each other, but they manage to work things out in time to save the day. Last, but certainly not least, we have Bubbles, voiced by Tara Strong, hands down everyone's favorite. In a nutshell, Bubbles is the cute one. She has a very cute and bubbly personality, hence the name, who loves pretty much anything that you would expect a 5-year-old girl to love. Most of the show's comedic elements come from her. I guess you could say she's like Fluttershy and Pinkie Pie mixed into a blender and made into a human. Though despite being mostly a cute softie, Bubbles has shown that she has a dark side when she proves that she's hardcore. Now, let's talk about the other main characters of the show. First, we have Professor Utonium, voiced by the late great Tom Kenny. He's the girls' creator and father. He's very intelligent and often talks like a scientist. But most of the time, the girls let what he says fly over their heads, and sometimes he can embarrass them too. As a man who grew up without a father, Craig McCracken wanted to make sure the girls had the best father available, and that was Tom Kenny for ya. And that was Tom Kane for ya. The girls still love him with all their hearts, and their lives would never be the same without him. Next is Miss Keene, voiced by Jennifer Hale, the girls' teacher. There isn't much to say about her other than she's a typical kindergarten teacher. The girls like her a lot, and they think she deserves a special someone in her life. Next, we've got the mayor of Townsville, voiced by Tom Kenny. He's very bumbling, stupid, and naive. He runs the city and often calls the girls when there's an emergency, whether it being a crime happening in the city, a monster destroying the city. Other times, it's for petty reasons, like asking them to help him open a jar of pickles. That's another thing about the mayor. He has an unhealthy obsession with pickles. However, his number one most prized possession that he's most obsessed with is his hat. The mayor is often addressed as mayor in this series, which is a common joke that occurs in a lot of cartoons in the later half of the 90s. But rumors suggest that his real name is Barney. In the episode Boogie Writes, there's a scene where he encounters his wife, who says to him, "Marnie, what is this?" "Oh, what is it?" But some people argue that she's just calling him honey. The mayor has a secretary named Sarah Bellum. Get it? Because she's smart? She's voiced by Jennifer Martin, and she's more down-to-earth than the mayor, and is often much more aware of what's going on in Townsville. She also usually ends up doing most of the work around his office. Ms. Bellum has this running gag in the series where she never reveals her pay. Whenever she's on screen, her face is either cut off by the cameras or is completely covered by something. And though, in the special of the Powerpuff Girls Rule, we see a very quick glimpse of it. And there's also the mayor, also voiced by Tom Kenny. He narrates and commentates on what's going on in the episode as it plays. Sometimes he breaks the fourth wall and talks to the characters. In fact, some of the jarble that he says, after the episode, is improvised. Now let's talk about the villains, because there's quite a few recurring villains on the show. The main villain of the show is Mojo Jojo, voiced by Roger Jackson. Mojo is an evil monkey with a superior intellect and a lot of high-tech gadgets that he uses to take over Townsville or stop the Powerpuff Girls. Though a running gag of his is that he talks in a very repetitive manner and tends to go off on an endless tangent. Like, for example, when he's at the grocery store and he asks where he can find the eggs, he would say, "Excuse me, sir, but can you direct me to the location of where I can locate some eggs, for I would like to purchase them so I can take them home with me and I can eat them today. And maybe tomorrow." The girls do get annoyed by this habit of his. The girls have also had times where they won and lost against Mojo. Next is Fuzzy Lumpkins, voiced by Jim Cummings. Fuzzy is a weird, fuzzy Sasquatch creature with a hillbilly personality. He has a habit of getting shotgun crazy and into a rage whenever people invade his property or personal space. The Gangrene Gang is a gang of 5 teenage bullies with green skin who like to pick on little kids and play pranks on people. They're basically just a gang of troublemakers. Their individual names are Ace, Scrubber, Snake, Little Arturo, and Big Billy. Princess Morbucks, also voiced by Jennifer Hale, is a spoiled rich girl who really wants to join the Powerpuff Girls. Her father is a billionaire, and whenever she doesn't get her way, she goes off on a tirade, but she always seems to get her problems solved when her father gives her money. The Amoeba Boys are a trio of giant amoeba, all voiced by late great Chuck McCann, who want to be criminals, but their attempts at committing crimes neither were hurt because they always do the most pathetic attempts at a crime. That's mostly because they have no brains whatsoever. And finally, we have him. Also voiced by Tom Kane, him is supposedly the ultimate evil, and he's so evil that even the sound of his real name can strike fear into the hearts of men. That's totally understandable because he's really creepy and talks with an even creepier voice. Fun fact, he was inspired by the Blue Meanie from the Beatles' Yellow Submarine. Most of the show's darkest episodes feature him as the main villain. He's mostly infamous for creating nightmare scenarios for the girls. Whenever he's present in the show, you know the show is not messing around anymore. There are other villains in the show, but they're mostly one-shot characters. I just wanted to cover the primary villains. Now, let's talk about the pilot episodes. In the pilots, Bubbles was voiced by Kaz Susi, but Tara Strong would take over her voice when the series officially began. The first pilot episode, Meet Fuzzy Lumpkins, aired on Cartoon Network in February 1995. As the title suggests, Fuzzy Lumpkins is the main villain of the pilot episode. In the episode, the Powerpuff Girls are judging jams that were made by residents of Townsville. One of the entries was Fuzzy's meat jam, but much to his dismay, the girls hated it. So Fuzzy decided to get revenge by inventing a meat gun, which turns everything into meat. The mayor in the pilot episode is not the same mayor we get in the official series. I guess a new election has passed after the pilot. I saw this pilot when it first aired, and I was just rolling on the floor laughing at it. It was so good and so entertaining. It got me excited to see more. The pilot episode was very successful. In fact, it was so successful that a second pilot came out a year later, Crime 101. This pilot features the Amoeba Boys as main villains. Here, the Amoeba Boys are trying to become criminals, but they have no luck, so the girls generously help them by showing them how to rob a bank. Of course, the police misinterpret this, thinking the girls are really robbing the bank and have them arrested, but they end up arresting the Amoeba Boys instead when they're found with the money that was stolen from the bank. This pilot wasn't as good as the first pilot, but it serves as a proper introduction to the Amoeba Boys, despite their names being slightly different in the pilot than their actual names in the show. Now that we've got the pilots out of the way, let's start talking about the main show itself. Every episode begins showing an overhead shot of the show's setting, Townsville, and it always opens with the narrator or another character of the show saying, "The City of Townsville." The basic premise of the show is that in every episode there's usually a crime or crisis going on in Townsville, and the girls go to save the day, either from a giant monster or one of the recurring villains. Sometimes the episode would be about one of the girls having a problem, and they try to solve it. Or they could be trying to help another character in the show. It's a simple, basic formula, but a good one at that. The show has a perfect blend of action and comedy to appeal to fans of both genres. Though there's another thing I should point out that makes the show more memorable, and that's the show's humor. There are some really good jokes in this series, but most of them come from Bubbles, the mayor, and even sometimes Professor Utonium. I love when the jokes get more random. Those always give me a good laugh. Though there are a few episodes where characters break the fourth wall and talk back and forth with the narrator, like in the episode Monster Mojo's Rising, when Mojo agrees with the narrator that he didn't save the day, even though the narrator said he did. One of the more clever instances is that in the episode Tough Love, when him turns all the love and the girls from everyone into hate, and at one point the narrator starts yelling at the girls, and they even take notice of that. There are also times when they refer to previous episodes. In the episode Insect Inside, Blossom gets a giant jar right out of nowhere. Then later on, in the episode Wreaking Havoc, she gets a giant match and tells Buttercup that she got it from the same place she got the giant jar. Though not all jokes are clever, there are some overused cliches in the series too. The Powerpuff Girls has pretty much used almost every cartoon cliche in the book. There's an episode where the girls try to be someone they're not, an episode where they do a totem pole trench, an episode where they become giants, an episode where they have to babysit a baby, a flashback episode, you name it. It happened in the show. Sometimes they tend to drag a joke out for way too long. Like in the episode Sunscreen, the girls get major sunburns limiting their mobility, and this results in an entire 3-minute sequence of Blossom trying to answer the hotline. Not all the jokes are for kids either. They actually managed to sneak in some adult humor too. A good example that comes to mind is in the episode Him Diddle Riddle, where Buttercup says to Blossom, "Can't you abacus any faster?" And Blossom responds with, "Abba kiss my butt!" Speaking of butts, there were also a few moments where we see characters naked on screen, like the mayor, Fuzzy, even though he's got a fur coat on already, and even the girls themselves to some extent. I don't know how they got away with that. There's even an episode called Curses where the girls learn a new word and start spreading it like crazy, not even realize that it's a swear word. Granted, every time they say it, it's centered by a random sound, but it still doesn't excuse the fact that they still say it. Honestly, the SpongeBob episode Sailor Mouth pulls this off better. Of course, the show also has a ton of pop culture references. Being that this was a Hanna-Barbera series, you also likely to see other Hanna-Barbera characters make cameos, like Fred Flintstone and George Jetson. Dexter from Dexter's Laboratory made several cameos in the show too, which is another series that Craig McCracken worked on, even though it was actually created by Genndy Tartakovsky. Right, the creator of Samurai Jack. Which, now that I think of it, the titular character of this series does look a bit like Professor Utonium. Still, the show doesn't shy away from its pop culture references. In the episode Toast of the Town, there's a part where the mayor says, "Oh, where's this? What does this button do?" The episode Coup d'etat has a lot of references of the show Knight Rider, and Buttercup even points that out. In that same episode, there is a line taken directly out of 2001: A Space Odyssey. The episode Bo Ling has Mojo make a reference to Schoolhouse Rock. The episode Jewel of the Isle is about a crook who's trying to get a jewel that somehow ended up in the girl's cereal box, and the mascot of the cereal is a mashup of various cereal mascots. But ultimately it pays homage to the Trix commercials, even satirizing the famous slogan. There's even an episode that's loaded with references to the Beatles, but I'll talk more on that later. Now that I've given a basic premise of this series and talked about the show's humor and characters, now it's time to talk about the history of the show. I'll go through each season one by one, explaining each one and pointing out some highlights of each season. Season 1 debuted on Cartoon Network on November 18, 1998, coincidentally Mickey Mouse's 70th birthday. Its original time slot was Wednesday nights at 8 p.m., and then they would replay the same episode on Friday night, Saturday morning, and Sunday night. And there were a lot of classic episodes in this season, like Monkey See, Doggy Do, Boogie Friends, Telephonies, and Bubble Vicious. One of the funniest episodes in the series is The Bare Facts, an episode that is shown entirely from the mayor's point of view. And after the girls save them from Mojo, each take turns telling the story about what happened, and each one keeps interjecting with their side of the story, resulting in a very hilarious outcome. And naturally, Bo Humbles' side of the story is funniest. There's also a bit of character development in this season, such as the girls each having their own unique powers. In Eyesore, Blossom learns that she has ice breath, and in Fuzzy Lunch, we learn that Bubbles' multilingual skills. One of the best episodes of this season is Mine for a Change. In this episode, Rainbow the Clown gets hit by a bleach truck and turns into a villain, getting rid of all Townsville's color and sound, and he goes by the name of Mr. Mime. Totally not ripping off Pokemon. But the highlight of the episode is the climax, where the girls perform the song Love Makes the World Go Round. Another group of antagonists introduced in this season are the Rowdy Rough Boys, who are basically evil boy counterparts of the Powerpuff Girls, originally intended as one-off characters but would return later. The season finale episode, Uh-Oh Dynamo, introduced us to a super mecha robot named Dynamo, which somehow got a lot of popularity for some of the fans. Overall, this was a good season to start the show off with its memorable moments and character development. Season 2 proved to be an even better season. By this time, the series was getting some more recognition and popularity, so naturally, this season would further expand on the possibilities of what the show had to offer. Princess Morbucks was introduced in the season premiere episode, Stuck Up, Up, and Away. A lot of the episodes in this season were a lot of fun, and some of them even taught some valuable life lessons. One of the more memorable episodes of this season is Beat Your Greens, which taught kids about the importance of eating your vegetables. There was also a very special Blossom, which taught kids that it's not right to steal. Then there was Mojo Jonesin, which taught kids not to take candy or anything from strangers. Though my favorite episode of the season is the Powerpuff Girls' Best Rainy Day Adventure Ever. That's a mouthful. In this episode, the girls decide to make their own pretend Powerpuff Girls adventure during a rainy day. It's a lot of fun and made me wish I was there having all the fun they were having. Though the season also has its share of dark episodes too. In the episode Twisted Sister, the girls attempt to make a fourth Powerpuff Girl, and they name her Bunny. Bunny got a lot of popularity from the fans, and from what I heard, spoiler alert, a lot of people cried after she sacrificed herself to save her sisters. It's just like how the Transformers fans cried over Optimus Prime's death in the 1986 animated movie. However, one of the most famous episodes of the entire series came from the season, and it's often regarded as the darkest episode of the entire season, Speed Demon. In this episode, the girls decide to race each other home after they get off school for summer vacation, only to discover that they somehow traveled to 50 years into the future and see how much Townsville has changed during that time. It turns out this was all a vision set up by him, and this is when him reveals his true form. Overall, this was another satisfying season. By the time season 3 came around, the Powerpuff Girls was at the peak of its popularity. Therefore, expectations would be high for the season. Like season 2, season 3 was also very strong, with tons of memorable quotes. There was a lot of fun episodes in this season, but also some pretty dark episodes too. One of the funniest episodes of the season is Child Fearing, where Mojo is somehow tasked to have hired the big girls, but the girls drive him crazy all night. Jewel the Isle was also in this season. Then there are also some dark episodes like Candy is Dandy, which teaches kids about the dangers of addiction and how they could corrupt one's mind. They also continue on what like Super Zeros teaches the old be yourself lesson. This season also had a one-shot villain that stood out to me. In this, Equal Fights, we're introduced to Femme Fatale, a female bandit who is extremely sexist, though quite possibly the best episode of the season and one of the best in the entire series is the season finale episode, Meet the Beat-Alls. In this episode, Mojo, Princess, Fuzzy, and him find out that they could defeat the Powerpuff Girls easily when they work together after they have failed numerous times individually. This results in an episode that is loaded with references to the Beatles, from visual references to lyrics of the song, and even references to actual events that happened during the Beatles' career. I could do a whole review on this episode alone. Though I've still got a lot more to cover, it's time to move on. Now, this is where things start to get a little confusing. From this point on in the series, the production order of the episode could vary depending on what part of the world you live in. I live in the United States, so this is how I remember the episodes airing from season 4 onward. But in other parts of the world, like the UK and Canada, the episodes were all shuffled around in a random order. Season 4 was the shortest season of the entire series. This series only had 10 episodes as opposed to the full 3 seasons, which had 13 episodes each. Also, each episode in the season was a full 22-minute long episode, whereas a majority of the other seasons mostly contained episodes with 2 11-minute shorts. This was easily the worst season of the whole series, since there really weren't any episodes that were all that memorable. Although, in the episode Film Fatale, there was a nice reference made where Bubbles mentioned that she's the fan favorite. Probably the creepiest episode of the season is Knock It Off, where Professor Utonium's college roommate, Dick Hartley, makes all these knockoff clones of the girls and sends them out around the world. This season was a real disappointment, and just to add insult to injury, it also had the slowest productions. Less than halfway through the season, the series made an unexpected hiatus for more than a year because Craig McCracken was busy working on the Powerpuff Girls movie. That brings us to the next thing I wanted to talk about. This movie came out in the summer of 2002. The movie was basically an origin story of how the girls were first created and how Mojo Jojo became their biggest enemy. For the first time, we learned how the girls got their names: Blossom because she was always open up to people, Bubbles because she's cute and bubbly, and Buttercup because, well, it also begins with a B. The first half of the movie is about the girls learning how to control their superpowers, which they eventually do. It also shows how they first met Mojo Jojo and how he was established as a villain towards them. Like every movie based on the cartoon series, except for the Simpsons movie and the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, the movie was a flop and was panned by critics. Audience gave it mixed reactions. As for me, I think it's a fun movie, but I only recommend it to hardcore fans of the Powerpuff Girls. Sadly, this movie would mark the beginning of the end of the Powerpuff Girls. Next, let's talk about the Christmas special, "'Twas the Fight Before Christmas," which aired on Christmas Eve 2003. I'm going to give away some spoilers here, so if you haven't seen the episode, I advise that you skip this section. In this episode, every kid in Townsville is excited for Christmas, but Princess Morbucks, as usual, is having her bad attitude. But the girls warn her that if she doesn't change her attitude, she'd end up on Santa's naughty list and with a lump of coal in her stocking. Having a hard time believing that, Princess decides to invade the North Pole and look at Santa's list, only to see that she's the only kid in the entire world who's on Santa's naughty list. To make sure she gets presents this year, she makes a switch so that only she gets presents and every other kid gets a lump of coal. The girls find out what's going on and end up traveling to the North Pole to find out about Santa's mistake. But Princess follows them and now has the girls' powers, which she got as a Christmas present. With the four battle each other, but Santa's infuriated over what's going on. Princess throws a tirade at Santa, trying to convince him that the girls are the guilty ones, and she's trying to make herself look like the good guy. Unfortunately for her, Santa knows that she's lying, and as punishment, she takes all of her presents back and puts her name on the permanent naughty plaque. One of the most satisfying ways I've ever seen a villain put in their place. Anyway, let's get back to the original series. Season 5 debuted in September of 2003. This was a major turning point of the series, since Craig McCracken was no longer running the series and brought the creative duties over to Chris Savino, who had just recently finished working on the 3rd and 4th seasons of Dexter's Lab. How much did the series change? For one thing, the animation got a major improvement now with the levels of the animation from the movie. Also, to make up for the 4th season being so short, this was the longest season, airing a total of 18 episodes. As for the episodes themselves, it's kind of a mixed bag. This season was not as good as the first 3 seasons, but there were a lot of good episodes on here. All the characters and villains we know and love from the show are back this season. Also, the Rowdy Rough Boys made the long-awaited return now as recurring villains of the show. Some of the most memorable episodes of the show, including PPG's, an episode where the girls think that one of them is winning the bed, Seed No Evil, an episode with a lot of hilarious dialogue, Silent Treatment, where the girls get themselves into a silent movie, Wreaking Havoc, where Professor Utonian's experimental chili ends up going horribly wrong, and Live and Let Dynamo, the only other episode to feature Dynamo. Some of the weaker episodes include Shotgun Wedding, an episode where the Professor Utonian tries to do research on Fuzzy Lumpkins and almost ends up marrying him, and Oops, I Did It Again, an episode that shows the girls how it would have turned out if they came out as normal little girls. One of the most random episodes of the season was City of Clipsville, where the girls go through a box of memorabilia of past adventures they had. At first, it seems like a flashback episode, but after the first 2, the rest of the flashbacks were not from previous episodes and were more likely inspired by fanfiction. Of all the flashbacks, the one that seemed to gain the most attention from the episode was the one where the girls were teenagers, since that one spawned a lot of fan art, and almost every other profile picture on Instagram. This episode reminded me a lot of one of the videos from Homestar Runner, specifically the Strong Bad email Personal Favorites, because it pretty much has the exact same layout. Personally, while I will agree that Chris Savino era didn't hold a candle to the Craig McCracken era, he did a much better job at maintaining the heart of the Powerpuff Girls, unlike what he did with Dexter's Lab. Season 6 will wind up being the last hurrah for the Powerpuff Girls. Most of the season aired in the summer of 2004. Much like Season 4, this was a short season, and in terms of episode quality, it was easy to tell that the writers were really hurting for ideas to keep the show alive. One of the worst episodes from this season is Custody Battle, where Mojo and him fight over who gets to keep the Rowdy Rough Boys as their kids. And this is the only episode where the girls don't officially appear in the episode at all. Another weak episode is West in Pieces, which is basically an episode of the show but set in the Wild West. This would have worked fine as a short 11-minute episode, but not a full-length 22-minute episode. Although, one of the more interesting aspects of the season is in a couple of episodes, Mojo comes up with more clever ways to mess with the girls, making it more difficult for them to save the day. Like in Crazy Mixed Up Pups and What's the Idea? Overall, the Powerpuff Girls was a great series for its time, and it has certainly aged well over the years, unlike its 2016 counterpart, which risked dating itself on so many levels. I was sad to see it officially end back in 2005, but it's no different from how I saw other favorite cartoons of mine get ended. All good things must come to an end. However, not all is over for the Powerpuff Girls still. Sometime after the 2016 series was canceled, it was announced that there was another new series in development, a live-action series for the CW featuring the Powerpuff Girls as teenagers. However, this project unfortunately got canceled for reasons unknown. Over the years, there have been rumors about a live-action Powerpuff Girls movie being in the works, but nothing was officially been confirmed about it. Then in 2022, Craig McCracken himself announced that he was going to make an official reboot of the Powerpuff Girls, along with a reboot of Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, with the latter being a preschool series. 4 years later, no further updates were announced on either of those said projects, but nothing was said about them being canceled either. As for the upcoming Powerpuff Girls reboot, Craig McCracken stated that he was very appalled by the 2016 reboot, and it inspired him to give those girls the proper reboot they deserved. When or if this ever comes, hopefully we'll see the true heart of the series come back into its full potential. As far as I know as of today, the series is still in the works, and McCracken is planning to have Kathy Cavadini, E.G. Daily, and Tara Strong all reprise their roles as the girls we all know and love. And he's also supposedly planning to bring back Tom Kenny back on board. Because what's a Craig McCracken series without Tom Kenny? As for the rest of the cast, we'll see what happens. The chances of a full cast reunion were completely shattered on May 18th, 2026, when Tom Kane passed away. A few years prior to his death, Kane suffered a massive stroke, which completely paralyzed the entire right half of his body, ultimately leading to him retiring from voice acting entirely. He never recovered from the stroke, and this ultimately led to his untimely death. But he still made public appearances and conventions, and such did during the last 5 years of his life. Even managed to have one last reunion with Cavadini, Daly, and Strong at one convention just 2 months before his passing. Regardless of what the future may hold for the Powerpuff Girls, the original series will always be an important part of my childhood and will always hold a special place in my heart, among others. And I know there are tons of other fans of the show who share the same passion. And so, once again, the review is saved, thanks to the Powerpuff Girls. Good night, everybody!